Imagine this. You've just moved into your dream home. The perfect place to start fresh, where you can finally build the garden of your dreams. A place filled with colorful flowers, lush vegetables, and the scent of fresh herbs in the air. You've carefully planned everything, saved up, and even watched hours of gardening videos to make sure it's perfect. You're ready to turn your backyard into your own personal sanctuary, a peaceful retreat. But then, boom, a Karen from the HOA decides to step in and tell you it's against the rules. What do? You don't back down. You go bigger. And that's exactly what I did when I created a botanical paradise in my own backyard. It all started when I bought my house. It wasn't the biggest place, but it had a huge backyard. I could already picture it in my head. Rows of vegetables, beautiful flowers, maybe even a few trees for shade. I'd always wanted a garden, and now that I finally had the space, I was determined to make it happen. My plan was simple. I'd create a place where I could relax and enjoy nature, and also grow my own food. A garden that would be both functional and beautiful. The first step was to clear the space. I spent weeks removing old brush, planting the seeds for future beds, and getting the soil ready. It was hard work, but I was determined. As the days passed, I could see it coming together. The garden beds started to take shape. The raised beds were in place, and I was adding flowers and plants all around the yard. The excitement was building. I could already see myself spending my weekends out there, relaxing in the sun while picking fresh tomatoes and basil. But that was when Margaret, the HOA Karen, decided to interfere. It was a sunny afternoon when she came by. I was out in the garden, planting some flowers, when I saw her walking up to the house, clipboard in hand. I'd seen her walking around the neighborhood before, inspecting lawns and making notes, but I never thought she'd come to check on me. She gave me a stiff smile and started walking toward me, her eyes scanning the garden with an almost clinical detachment. "Hello," she said in a businesslike tone. "I need to talk to you about your garden." I looked up, surprised. "What about it?" "Well," she said, "you can't have this here." "Excuse me?" I asked, not understanding what she meant. "The HOA guidelines are very clear," she continued, her tone becoming more authoritative. "You're not allowed to have a garden like this. You need to tear it down and remove all the plants. It's not the right aesthetic for the neighborhood." I stood there for a moment, speechless. Aesthetic? My heart sank as I realized what was happening. Margaret was telling me to rip out my garden, the one I had worked so hard on, just because it didn't fit into her narrow view of what was acceptable. It didn't make sense to me. I was just trying to enjoy my property, create something beautiful, and even contribute to the community by growing my own food. But Margaret wasn't having it. I tried to reason with her. "Margaret, I've looked through the HOA rules, and there's nothing that says I can't have a garden. It's not in anyone's way, and it's not blocking any views." "That doesn't matter," she replied, barely looking at me. "The HOA rules are very specific, and you're in violation. If you don't remove it, I'll report it to the board, and they'll fine you." At that moment, I felt a surge of frustration. Who did she think she was? This was my property, and I wasn't about to let some self-appointed neighborhood enforcer dictate how I used it. But instead of arguing, I decided to take a different approach. I wasn't going to tear down my garden. No way. If Margaret thought my garden was too much, I was going to turn it into something so beautiful, so extravagant, that she'd have no choice but to respect it. I wasn't going to just follow the rules. I was going to outdo them. I started planning a bigger project, a botanical garden that would transform my backyard into something so spectacular, it would be impossible for anyone to complain. I began researching ideas, gathering inspiration from some of the world's most stunning gardens. I wanted to create a space that felt like an oasis, a place where I could escape, relax, and let nature surround me. And I was going to do it all within the HOA guidelines. I decided to make the garden a blend of functional beauty. Instead of just vegetable beds, I would create pathways, add decorative features, and use native plants that would attract butterflies and bees. The garden would include aromatic herbs, colorful flowers, and even a water feature to bring some serenity into the space. I wasn't just making a garden, I was making a botanical paradise. I called in a landscaper to help me bring this dream to life. Together, We drew up a detailed plan that included a central flower bed, a series of meandering paths to create a sense of discovery, and a water fountain as a focal point. We'd use natural stone to line the walkways, and I'd incorporate shrubbery and trees that would add structure and shade. I wanted it to feel like a place you could wander through for hours, admiring every plant, taking in the scents, and hearing the soothing sound of water flowing. The first phase of the project involved transforming the space into something that felt more like a garden oasis than a backyard. We started by planting a mix of flowers and herbs around the perimeter, making sure that there were pops of color and fragrance wherever you walked. I also added small trees, such as ornamental cherries and maples, to provide some height and structure to the landscape. As the work continued, I found myself spending more and more time in the garden. I watched as the flowers bloomed, the plants grew, and the space began to look more and more like the dream I had envisioned. It wasn't just a simple garden anymore. It was a place of tranquility, where I could escape from the world. But Margaret wasn't done yet. A week into the transformation, she showed up again, clipboard in hand, this time with a more official look in her eyes. "Still working on the garden?" she asked, her tone flat. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my cool. "I decided to expand it a bit. I think it looks great, don't you?" She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the space, taking in the lush flowers, the meandering pathways, and the water feature we had just installed. There was a slight change in her demeanor, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of respect in her eyes. But it didn't last long. "I'm still going to have to report this," she said flatly. "You're still violating HOA guidelines. This isn't allowed." I smiled, a bit of satisfaction creeping in. "Margaret, I've checked the rules. This garden is within all the guidelines. I've followed every rule. You can even ask the HOA board if you need to. I've done everything right." She hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure of how to respond. But instead of backing down, I stood firm, confident in what I had created. This wasn't just a garden anymore. It was a botanical paradise, and it was something worth fighting for. As I stood there, watching Margaret's frustrated expression, I could feel a sense of triumph. She had no real grounds to stop me, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone else dictate what I could do with my property. For a moment, I thought she might push further, but instead, she turned on her heel and walked away, clipboard still in hand, likely heading straight to the HOA board. I didn't let it bother me. The truth was, I was more invested than ever in what I was creating. The botanical paradise was beginning to take shape, and it was becoming clear that this garden wasn't just a rebellion. It was an expression of my vision and creativity. Each flower, each plant, each stone pathway was a step toward creating something beautiful and lasting. Over the next few weeks, the garden flourished. The flowers bloomed in brilliant colors, the water feature gurgled softly, and the trees I had planted began to fill out, offering shade and structure. The paths wound through the space, like a hidden garden waiting to be discovered, leading to nooks with small seating areas perfect for quiet reflection. I even added a small arbor with climbing roses, creating a secluded corner where I could enjoy a peaceful moment with a book or a cup of coffee. It didn't take long for the neighbors to notice. I had already received a few compliments, but the more the garden grew, the more people came by to admire it. One afternoon, as I was pruning a few of the rose bushes, I heard footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw Steve, one of my neighbors, walking towards me with a curious smile. "Wow, your name. This is really something," he said, looking around. "You've turned this place into a botanical wonderland. I've never seen anything like it." I smiled and waved my shears in the air. "Thanks, Steve. It's been a lot of work, but I'm really proud of it. It's becoming more than just a garden now. It's like a little escape." Steve nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking about planting a garden myself, but I wasn't sure where to start. I always wanted something like this in my own backyard. Maybe you could give me a few tips." I couldn't believe my ears. I had inspired someone else to start their own garden. Here I was, getting praise from a neighbor who, just weeks earlier, had probably never considered the idea of a full garden in his yard. The thought that my hard work was making a positive impact on the community felt amazing. "Of course," I said, walking toward him. I'd love to help. You've got to start small and pick plants that are easy to manage. Tomatoes, lettuce, herbs, maybe some flowers to brighten the space. I'll show you how to get started if you want. Steve seemed genuinely excited about the idea, and I made a note to set up a time to visit his yard and help him get started. That was exactly what I had wanted, to turn my garden into something that not only brought me peace, but also inspired others to connect with nature and grow something beautiful. A few days later, I found myself out in the garden again, working on the plants, when I saw Margaret walking down the street again. She hadn't said anything more about the garden after her visit, and I had to admit, I wondered if she had come to terms with it. This time, I didn't feel the tension in the air as I had before. I was confident in my decisions and the space I had created. If she had an issue, I would deal with it. To my surprise, she walked straight up to me and, after a brief pause, said, "I'll admit, I didn't think it would look this nice." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you serious? After all the complaints you made?" She hesitated before speaking again. "I thought it was just going to be another eyesore, but it's actually quite beautiful. I've had a chance to walk around, and the flowers, the trees, the whole space is peaceful. I can see why you were so determined.